I don't even know how to start this. Honestly, it's been eating me alive for weeks and I just need to get it out. You know how sometimes you think you know someone inside and out, like you could predict their every move, and then they do something that flips your whole perspective on its head? That's exactly what happened to me with Laura. Laura isn't just anybody to me. She's my sister-in-law. Yeah, you heard that right, my wife's younger sister. She's been around since forever, always coming to family dinners, staying over for holidays, and cracking jokes with the kids. I used to see her as just part of the family furniture, like you don't really see them, they're just there. But a few weeks ago, something changed. Started on a random Tuesday night. My wife Sarah had taken the kids to her parents' house for the weekend because they had some birthday thing for her uncle. I couldn't go because of work, so I stayed back. That evening, I was watching TV when Laura called, saying her car broke down about 15 minutes from our house. Of course, I told her to come over while she waited for a tow truck. When she showed up at the door, she looked different. Not in a way you'd expect. She wasn't all dressed up or anything. She just looked casual, but somehow it felt intentional. I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to my imagination. She came in, we talked a bit, and I offered her something to drink while she called the tow company. It was all normal, just two people hanging out waiting for the inevitable car trouble saga to sort itself out. But then, when she laughed at one of my dumb jokes, like really laughed, it hit me. There was something in the way her eyes lingered a second too long, the way she leaned just a little closer than usual. I tried to shake it off, but then came the moment that's been replaying in my mind ever since. She got up to grab her phone from the kitchen counter, and as she walked back, she bumped into the corner of the table, spilling her drink all over her shirt. She groaned, embarrassed, and I grabbed her a towel. "Gosh, I'm such a klutz," she said, laughing nervously. "You're fine. Don't worry about it," I replied, handing her the towel. But instead of just wiping the drink off, she caught my eye. Her tone softened as she said, "Thanks. You've always been so nice to me." Now, maybe it was innocent, maybe I was reading too much into it, but there was something in the way she said it, like she wasn't just talking about the drink or the towel. It was late by then, so I told her to crash in the guest room since the tow truck was taking forever. She agreed, but as I walked past the guest room later that night, I heard her on the phone with someone, whispering. I couldn't make out the words, but it didn't sound like your usual car broke down convo. And then, as I turned to head back to my room, the door creaked open just a crack, and she peeked out. "You still up?" she asked, her voice low and almost hesitant. I froze for a second before answering, "Yeah, just heading to bed. Good night," she said with a small smile that lingered just a little too long before she shut the door. And let me tell you, that smile didn't feel like the kind you get from family. The next morning, I woke up with a pit in my stomach. You ever feel like something's just off, but you can't quite put your finger on it? That was me, lying there, staring at the ceiling. I told myself I was overthinking everything from the night before, that Laura wasn't acting weird and that I needed to chill out. But the thing is, once you notice something, you can't unsee it. When I finally dragged myself out of bed, I found Laura in the kitchen making coffee. She looked up, smiled, and said, "Morning. I hope you don't mind. I made enough for both of us." I nodded, trying to play it cool. "No problem. Sleep okay?" "Yeah," she said, sipping her coffee. "Thanks again for letting me stay over. I know it's weird with Sarah not here and all." There it was again, that undertone. Was I imagining it, or was she trying to acknowledge something without saying it outright? We sat at the table, talking about random stuff. Work, the kids, her plans for the day. But then she said something that threw me off. "I always felt like you were the one person in this family who really understood me," she said, her voice softer than before. I laughed awkwardly. "Well, I'm pretty good at listening, I guess." "No, it's more than that," she said, looking straight at me. "You just get me." Now, don't get me wrong. I wasn't trying to read into anything. But the way she said it, the way her eyes locked onto mine, it was like she was saying something she couldn't put into words. Before I could respond, her phone buzzed. The tow truck guy was finally on his way. She stood up, grabbed her bag, and said, "Thanks again for everything. Really, I owe you one." As she walked to the door, she turned back and added, "You're a good man. You know that?" That phrase stuck with me all day. Later that evening, Sarah called to check in. She told me how the kids were having a blast at their grandparents' place and asked how my day was. I wanted to tell her everything about Laura, the weird tension, the way she'd been acting. But how do you even begin to say something like that without it sounding wrong? So I lied. I told her everything was fine, that work had been busy, and that I missed her and the kids. But the truth is, I couldn't stop thinking about Laura. And then, a week later, she showed up at our house again. This time it was for dinner with the whole family. Sarah had invited her, of course, and everything seemed normal. Laughing, talking, the usual chaos with the kids running around. But there were these small moments I don't think anyone else noticed, like when Laura offered to help me carry dishes to the kitchen, or when she brushed her hand against mine while passing me a plate, or when she caught my eye from across the table and held my gaze just a second too long. I kept telling myself I was imagining things. But then, as we were cleaning up after dinner, she said something that stopped me in my tracks. Do you ever feel like, I don't know, like life didn't turn out the way you thought it would? I glanced at her, unsure how to respond. What do you mean? She shrugged, her voice low, like you had all these plans, all these dreams. And then one day you wake up and realize none of it happened the way you wanted. I could feel my throat tighten. I guess everyone feels like that sometimes. She nodded, staring at the floor. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder if I made the wrong choices, you know? The way she said it, the way her voice wavered, it felt like she was talking about more than just her life. And then, just as quickly as the moment started, it ended. Sarah walked into the kitchen, laughing about something one of the kids said, and Laura snapped back into her usual cheerful self. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, something I didn't fully understand yet. The days after that dinner felt strange, like I was carrying a secret I didn't ask for. I kept replaying those moments with Laura in my head, wondering if I was overthinking or if there really was something beneath the surface. Sarah didn't notice anything, of course. Why would she? To her, Laura was just her sister, someone she'd known her whole life, someone she trusted. And I kept telling myself that I wasn't doing anything wrong. But the truth was, I didn't know where the line was anymore. It was about a week later when Laura called me out of the blue. It wasn't unusual for her to call Sarah, but she almost never called me. So when my phone buzzed and her name popped up, my heart skipped a beat. Hey, Laura, everything okay? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yeah, I'm fine, she said a little too quickly. I don't know, I wanted to say thanks for being so nice to me lately. It's been a rough couple of weeks, and I guess I just needed to talk to someone. I hesitated. You know you can always talk to Sarah, right? There was a pause on the other end. I know. It's just, sometimes it's easier to talk to someone who isn't, so close. The way she said it made my chest tighten. Well, I'm here if you need to talk, I said carefully. For the next 20 minutes, we talked about everything and nothing. Her job, her friends, the random stuff going on in her life. It felt innocent enough at first, but there was this undertone I couldn't ignore, like she was testing the waters. And then she said something that left me speechless. Do you ever feel like you're stuck? She asked, her voice almost a whisper. Stuck? How? Like you're living the life you're supposed to live, not the one you actually want. I didn't know how to respond. My instinct was to shut the conversation down, to steer it back to safer ground. But instead, I found myself saying, sometimes, yeah. There was a long pause before she said, it's nice to know I'm not the only one who feels that way. The conversation ended not long after that, but her words stayed with me. And then 2 days later, she showed up at our house again. It was a Saturday afternoon, and Sarah was out running errands with the kids. I was working in the garage when I heard a car pull up. When I saw it was Laura, my stomach dropped. Hey, she said, stepping out of the car. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying to keep my voice casual. Sarah's not here. She's out with the kids. I know, she said, her eyes meeting mine. I actually came to see you. That sentence hit me like a ton of bricks. What's going on? I asked, my voice a little too sharp. She hesitated, looking down at the ground. I've been feeling really lost lately, and you're the only person I feel like I can talk to. I sighed, leaning against the workbench. Laura, I'm not sure this is a good idea. What isn't? She asked, stepping closer. This, I said, gesturing between us. I don't know what's going on with you, but we can't. We shouldn't. I'm not trying to make things weird, she interrupted, her voice shaky. I don't know who else to turn to. There was something in her voice that stopped me from saying what I wanted to say. That this had to stop. That this was crossing a line. Instead, I said, Laura, you're not alone. Whatever you're dealing with, you can get through it. She nodded, but the look in her eyes told me she wasn't just talking about her problems. And then, before I could say anything else, she reached out and put her hand on mine. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I pulled my hand away, stepping back. I think you should go, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She looked at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Sadness, maybe, or regret. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I didn't mean to make things uncomfortable. Before I could respond, she turned and walked back to her car. As I watched her drive away, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of whatever was happening between us. For the next few days, I tried to pretend everything was normal. I focused on work, spent time with Sarah and the kids, and did my best to push the memory of Laura's visit out of my head. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. It wasn't just her hand on mine, or the way she'd looked at me. It was the fact that I hadn't stopped her sooner. I told myself I was just trying to be polite, to avoid hurting her feelings, but deep down, I knew the truth. Part of me didn't want to stop her, and that scared me more than anything. The next time I saw Laura was at another family dinner. Sarah had invited her again, and as usual, she showed up with her signature smile and a bottle of wine. From the outside, she looked like her usual self, bubbly, cheerful, and completely at ease. But I knew better. Throughout the evening, I could feel her watching me. Not in an obvious way. She was too smart for that. But in those quiet moments, when no one else was looking, her eyes would meet mine, and I'd feel that same unspoken tension bubbling beneath the surface. At one point, Sarah asked me to grab something from the garage, and before I could even stand up, Laura said, I'll help him. I shot her a look, but she just smiled innocently. Once we were in the garage, away from everyone else, she closed the door behind her and turned to face me. We need to talk, she said, her voice firm. There's nothing to talk about, I said, keeping my tone low. Yes, there is, she said, stepping closer. You've been avoiding me, and I need to know why. Laura, I said, trying to keep my composure, you know why? Whatever this is, it can't happen. She folded her arms, her expression unreadable. I'm not asking for anything from you. I need to know if I'm the only one who feels this way. I stared at her, my mind racing. I wanted to tell her she was imagining things, that there was nothing between us, but the words wouldn't come out. Laura, I said finally, you're not thinking clearly. You're going through something, and it's making you see things that aren't there. Don't do that, she said, her voice shaking. Don't make me feel like I'm crazy. I know what I feel, and I know you feel it too. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could say anything, the door creaked open, and Sarah walked in. Everything okay in here? She asked, looking between us. Yeah, I said quickly, grabbing the box she'd sent me for. We were just grabbing this. Laura smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Just catching up, she said lightly. Sarah didn't seem to notice anything unusual, but as we walked back to the house, I could feel Laura's tension radiating off her. That night, after everyone had left and the kids were in bed, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. Sarah was asleep next to me, completely unaware of the storm brewing under her roof. I kept thinking about what Laura had said in the garage, about not wanting anything, about just needing to know. But I knew it wasn't that simple. It never was. And then, just as I was starting to drift off, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Laura. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make things harder for you. I'll stay away. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I wanted to reply, to tell her it was okay, that she didn't need to stay away. But I knew that would only make things worse, so I put the phone down and turned it off. But as I lay there in the dark, I couldn't help but wonder if I just made things worse by saying nothing at all. The next few days passed in a strange blur. I went through the motions, work, family dinners, the usual routine, but I couldn't shake the feeling that everything around me had changed. I kept thinking about Laura's text, about how she'd said she would stay away, but I knew that wasn't going to happen. You don't just walk away from something like this. Even if we were both pretending it didn't exist, it was still there, hanging in the air between us. The tension was suffocating, and I felt like I was walking a tightrope, trying not to fall into something I wasn't ready to face. It wasn't that I didn't care about Laura. I did, but I loved Sarah, and this, whatever it was, it couldn't continue. It was a Saturday afternoon when it all came to a head. I was sitting on the porch, sipping a beer and trying to clear my head. Sarah had taken the kids to the park, leaving me with some much-needed silence, but it didn't last long. As I was zoning out, I saw Laura's car pull into the driveway. My heart skipped a beat. I thought I was imagining things, but sure enough, there she was, walking toward the house with that same smile she'd had the first time she showed up unannounced. I stood up instinctively, wiping my hands on my jeans, already feeling the weight of what was about to happen. "Hey," she said softly as she got closer. "Can we talk?" "I don't know if that's a good idea," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm not here to cause any trouble," she said, her eyes downcast. "I just need to talk to you, please." I sighed, glancing over my shoulder to make sure Sarah wasn't pulling into the driveway. "All right, but this has to stay between us, nothing more." Laura nodded a little too quickly. I motioned for her to sit down beside me, and we both fell silent for a moment, neither of us sure how to start. "I've been thinking a lot," she finally said, breaking the silence, "about everything, and I think I might have been wrong about what I was feeling." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" She paused, clearly struggling to find the right words. "I don't want to ruin things for you. I don't want to cause any problems between you and Sarah. I know I've crossed a line." The relief I felt was almost overwhelming. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the end of whatever had been growing between us. I wanted to believe that, but then she said something that froze me in place. "I don't think I can stop feeling the way I do about you, though." My breath caught in my throat. "Laura, this can't keep happening. It was a mistake." She didn't respond at first. She just looked at me, her expression unreadable. Then, in a low voice, she said, "I'm not asking for anything more, but I just need to know that you feel it too, that I'm not crazy." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out because honestly, I didn't know anymore. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, and I was torn between what I knew was right and what I was starting to feel for her. The pull between us was undeniable, but I also knew that giving into it would be the biggest mistake of my life. Before I could say anything, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, then put it down without looking at the screen. "I should go," she said softly, standing up. "I just wanted to say what was on my mind. I'm sorry if I made things weird." "You don't need to apologize," I said quickly, "but this can't continue." "I know," she whispered, her eyes brimming with something I couldn't name. "But I can't pretend I don't feel this way." And with that, she turned and walked back to her car. As I watched her drive away, I felt like I just made the hardest decision of my life, but I didn't feel relieved. I felt empty. I stood there for a long time after she left, unsure of what to do with all the feelings swirling inside me. I wanted to tell Sarah everything. I wanted to come clean, to finally let go of the guilt and confusion, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would she think of me? Would she ever look at me the same way again? The next few days felt like I was walking around in a fog. I avoided Laura's texts, and every time I saw Sarah, I tried to act normal, but inside, I was falling apart. And then, a week later, Sarah came to me with something that nearly broke me. "I think we need to talk," she said one night after the kids had gone to bed. I froze. "About what?" "I've been feeling like something's off between us," she said softly, sitting down beside me. "Is there something you're not telling me?" My heart raced. I knew that tone, knew what it meant. "Sarah, I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice trembling despite myself. But Sarah wasn't convinced. She leaned in closer, her eyes searching mine. "You're not good at hiding things, you know," she said gently, "and I think I know what's been going on. What happened between you and Laura?" The moment Sarah asked that question, my stomach dropped. It was like the world paused for a second, leaving me with nothing but the weight of her gaze and the crushing reality of everything I'd been hiding. I should have been prepared for it, right? After everything that had been happening with Laura. Those little moments, the silence, the tension, it was only a matter of time before Sarah noticed. But when it finally came to a head, I was anything but ready. I looked at her, trying to steady my breath, but the words stuck in my throat. "You've been acting so distant lately," she continued, her voice soft but steady. "I don't know what's going on, but I feel like I'm losing you." I could see the hurt in her eyes, and it made me feel like the worst person alive. Sarah deserved better. She didn't deserve any of this. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what's going on with me, but there's nothing between me and Laura. I swear." She gave me a look, one I couldn't quite read. It wasn't anger or disappointment. Not at first. It was more like she was waiting, giving me the space to admit something I wasn't ready to admit. And then she said it, the thing I'd been dreading. "I'm not stupid," she said, her voice quiet. "I've seen the way she looks at you. I've seen the way you've been looking at her." I felt my heart stop. "I don't want to hear any more lies," Sarah said, her voice breaking. "Just tell me the truth. Was there something between you and Laura?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself. It was time. It was time to come clean. "Yes," I whispered, barely able to get the word out, but it never went further than that. "We didn't do anything. It was just, I don't know, a mistake. A moment I should have never let happen." Sarah sat there for a moment, her face expressionless. I couldn't read her, and that terrified me more than anything. "I don't know what to say," she said finally, her voice almost a whisper. "I just don't know how we got here." I reached out for her hand, but she pulled away before I could touch her. "I never meant to hurt you," I said, my voice desperate. "I didn't want any of this to happen. It was just, I don't know, something that happened, and I thought I could stop it, but I couldn't. I should have been honest with you sooner." Sarah shook her head, her eyes filled with tears. "But you didn't. You kept it from me and you kept lying. And now I'm left here wondering how I didn't see it. How did I not see it? How did you not think about me?" "I thought about you every second," I said, my voice breaking. "But I was scared. Scared of losing you. Scared of everything." She stood up abruptly, pacing back and forth in the living room. "I don't even know who you are anymore. How could you do this to me? To us?" I stood up too, desperate to make things right, but I knew I couldn't fix it. Not right now. "I made a huge mistake. I'm so sorry, Sarah. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted this to happen." She turned to me, her eyes wild with emotion. "You say you're sorry, but what does that even mean? You've crossed a line with my sister. You don't even understand what you've done." I know," I said, my voice pleading. "I can't change what happened, but I can make it right. I'll do whatever it takes. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I love you." There was a long silence, and for a second, I thought maybe, just maybe, she would forgive me. But then she spoke, her voice cold, distant. "I need time," she said, her tone final. "I can't even look at you right now." I felt a pang in my chest, but I knew she was right. She deserved time to process everything. Time to decide if she could ever look at me the same way again. "I'll give you all the time you need," I said softly. "But please don't give up on us. Please don't give up on me." She didn't say anything more. She just turned and walked toward the stairs. That night, I sat alone in the living room, replaying every single moment that had led up to this. All the little signs I'd ignored, the moments I'd brushed off, the lies I'd told myself. I kept thinking, if I had just been honest with her from the start, maybe none of this would have happened. Maybe I wouldn't have been on the verge of losing everything I cared about. But that was the reality now. I didn't know if Sarah could ever forgive me. I didn't know if we could come back from this. And worst of all, I didn't know how I would ever fix the mess I'd made. But one thing was for sure. I had crossed a line, and no matter what happened next, I would never be the same.